So after we finishing the monopoly, I'm going to talk about oligopoly. Oligopoly by definition is market with some competition, but not perfect. So there are basically there are two strategy that oligopolists can choose. The first is cooperatively. It's form a cartel, and the second is non-cooperatively, most common because cartel is in 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 very in a lot of economy. It's illegal. So here is game theory. It's very important in oligopoly because like two different firms, they basically need to think think how think the set of strategy and how to best respond their counterparts strategy. So game theory is important. So the strategy is conditional of what others do. Dive into game theory, we need to establish a very important concept is equilibrium concept. When the game ends, so basically there are tons of different equilibrium terminology, but we just do a very simple in this section. We I'm going to introduce a very the most important equilibrium called Nash equilibrium. That means no firms change their strategy given what other firms are doing. So basically, how to find the Nash equilibrium is depend on find each firm's dominant strategy. So doesn't necessarily lead to most efficient solution compared to com- actually Nash equilibrium do not lead to the most efficient solution. And what's a dominated strategy? Strategy is no matter what the other first does, they will be better off by choosing this strategy. On the other hand, we also have a strategy called strictly dominant strategy. That is no matter what the other firms does, they will be worse off by just that strategy. It's the opposite of dominant strategy. So um a very important part of how to analyze a game. We are going to introduce a new tool called payoff matrix. Here is an example. We have two different company with Coke and Pepsi, and if two Coca if two Coke company choose to advertise, they both get 3 units of consumption, and if they choose not because advertise costs money compared to not advertise is just even. Um, the total is 16 units of consumption, and if they don't advertise, they just got 50-50. If one firm chooses to advertise and the other does not, then one firm gets 16, which is all units of consumption, and the other gets 0. So we can say if So how we find the dominant strategy. So if the Coke choose to advertise, what should the other company do? The Pepsi the Pepsi choose to if the Coke choose advertise, then Pepsi choose to advertise is three. And oh, this. Sorry. This is what Coke choose to advertise, and the Pepsi, if they do advertise, he gets three, and not advertise gets zero. The same is symmetric. So if the Pepsi do the advertise, then the Coke should choose advertise, because if not, it gets zero. And the same is not advertise, so he should choose advertise because he can get all the market. So by just simple thinking, we can find a conclusion that both companies dominant strategy is to advertise. But as we have mentioned, that Nash equilibrium aren't necessarily lead to most efficient solution. So if they choose not to advertise, they can get it's both A, which is they don't need to pay the cost of advertisement. Okay, so it's called the prisoner's dilemma. That means both players' dominant strategy will lead them worse off. Then yeah, so that is a very brief introduction of game theory. Okay, so we have Nash equilibrium in game theory. We have another equilibrium. It's Cournot's equilibrium. That means two functions with a continuum of outcomes. Set of quantities that each funds chooses holding the quantities of other funds constant. So they can't constant strategy, and they can't obtain higher profits by owning the other funds the other funds quantity of item. The profit maximizing for one firm. Marginal cost is the same. We just assume that is same. Marginal revenue. How we solve this problem? We calculate the residual demand. Its demand left by opponents, and we compute the marginal revenue. It's important we set marginal revenue equals to marginal cost, which is this intersection, and we need to obey the demand curve, so the price should be there, quantity should be here, and we do the same for the other thing. Solve n equations in n unknowns, so we compare best response curve. Okay, so after we go the steps, we can get each one's best response curves, and we have an intersection that is a bundle which friends should do. Okay, so it's Cournot's equilibrium, which is we do quantity analysis and we draw the best response curve. Okay. So lecture 14 also is about market equilibrium. No, it's also about oligopoly. Collaborative equilibrium cartels take multiple firms and act as one firm to monopolize the market, which is cartelizing. For example, we have two allies, and the price production function is here. We say the marginal cost is constant. We derive the marginal revenue, which is should equals to the marginal revenue equals to price. Um, it should be squared. Just never mind. The revenue, just the marginal revenue. Here we set the revenue equals to price, so we differentiate. So we get the marginal revenue is should equals to marginal cost, and we solve the Q star and the P star. So per firm that the profit is 4,608. What's the steps? Is solve the monopoly problem and split Q and profit even. Q and profit even. The reasons for not many cartels. So by cooperation, we can get a more ideal conclusion, ideal profits. But why there are not so many cartels here? Because cartels are unstable. Funds are incentivized to cheat. They have these incentives to cheat, to bet off, to take another strategy. So it's about trust. They have a trust problem. They want to front a cartel. And cartels are illegal. Most of government's policy build antitrust laws, so it's hard to form a cartel on certain economy. So yeah, for example, NFL is a cartel, and can't buy only one team's game, and the Supreme Court made an exemption. It's just an example. Okay. So we comparing equilibrium. We introduce a perfect competition under the monopoly, the oligopoly. We just do some math, and here is a conclusion chart. Monopoly, we should choose 69. The quantity we can see as the market is more competitive. The quantity gets more, and the profits just decreases quickly. Yeah, in long run perfect competition, profit equals to zero. And the firms want least amount of competition. They don't want the competition because competition just decreases their money. The social welfare is worse with less competition. But for the total social welfare, be careful. Not only produce a surplus, but also the consumer surplus. Total welfare increases as the market more competitive. So the many firms. So how about many firms? With the example of oligopoly, we said the two firms. The monopoly is one firm. The perfectly competitive market is many firms. It's an infinite firms. So how about many firms? In Conrad model, as more firms enter the market, we approach the perfect competition. So remember this equation, you put in n. The epsilon should times n, and it's a unit of funds. So the Connaught equilibrium is basically about quantities. How about we analyze a problem with price? It's a Bertrand model. The price goes to marginal cost if if funds were below one in perfect competition. So price competition is more vigorous than quantity competition. Compete on price versus quantity quantities depends on how quickly you can meet demand. Less slower, that means more quantity competition. So that's all about oligopolies. We do the same as monopoly. But here is game theory. Game theory is very important in oligopoly model. Okay, thank you for listening. Here is lecture 13 and lecture 14.